The first thing that strikes you is the silence. Not the peaceful kind, but the heavy, suffocating quiet that settles over a room when men finally see something they never prepared for. The map on the table is dimly lit, its surface crowded with red pins marking the islands Japan once believed were secure. But the newest reports, still warm from the radio desk, repaint the entire Pacific. American task forces are moving faster than any officer in this room thought possible. One colonel whispers that the numbers must be wrong. Another leans closer, reading them again, slower this time, as if a second look might change the truth. A faint crackle from the radio cuts through the tension, followed by a message confirming yet another American carrier group sighted farther west than expected. A senior officer mutters, This cannot be correct," though the tremor in his voice says he already knows it is. The data no longer fits the Empire's assumptions. The room senses it. This is the first fracture, the subtle moment when confidence begins to slip into fear and no one dares say what they're all thinking. The doors slide open, and the weight of authority enters with them. Admiral Nagumo steps in first, flanked by Yamamoto's aides and a line of intelligence officers carrying folders stacked far too thick for comfort. No one speaks until the papers hit the table. Intercepts, submarine sightings, carrier movements, each document feels like a small blow, and together they form a storm the room can no longer ignore. One strategist scans a decoded transmission and murmurs, "They weren't supposed to replace their losses this quickly." His words drift across the table like smoke, unwelcome but undeniable. Nagumo picks up a second report, then a third, his expression tightening with every line he reads. The Americans have not only restored their strength after Midway and Guadalcanal, they have exceeded it, and the numbers make that truth impossible to hide. A young officer tries to steady the moment by suggesting the data might be exaggerated. But the silence that follows is louder than any argument. Everyone knows exaggeration is a luxury they no longer have. These reports are not isolated errors. They form a pattern, precise and relentless. Each page pushes the same message. The balance of power is shifting, and Japan is no longer the one dictating the pace. The first shock doesn't come from a battlefield report, but from a single line buried in a production summary. An officer reads it aloud, his voice barely steady. Another Essex-class carrier has launched, with 2 more nearing completion. The room shifts uncomfortably as he continues, listing squadrons of new Hellcat fighters already deployed, and submarine numbers rising faster than Japan can track. The scale feels unreal, almost impossible, yet every figure is confirmed by separate intelligence. An admiral closes his eyes for a moment before admitting in a tone just above a whisper, "We cannot match this speed." His words settle like a verdict. For years, Japanese planners assumed distance and time would slow America's response, that their industrial capacity, while immense, would take too long to mobilize. But now the evidence lies in front of them. Factories running day and night, assembly lines turning steel into carriers, planes, and submarines at a rhythm no nation in history had ever achieved. Each month, Japan loses ground. Each month, America gains it. The officers look back to the map, realizing the war has shifted into a realm Japan has no hope of dominating. Strategy, bravery, and experience still matter, but they are no longer the deciding force. The Pacific's future now belongs to whoever can build faster, longer, and without pause, and only one nation fits that description. At first, the new reports are met not with acceptance, but with arguments sharp enough to cut through the stale air of the war room. Several commanders insist the Americans must be inflating their numbers, claiming no nation could field so many carriers in such a short time. Others argue that intelligence officers are misreading the intercepts, grasping for any explanation that keeps the Empire's confidence intact. But each incoming message chips away at that comfort. A fresh dispatch confirms multiple carrier groups advancing simultaneously, and the room goes still. Someone whispers the line no one wants to hear. America now has more carriers at sea than Japan has planes left to defend them. The weight of that reality hits the younger officers first. Their eyes drift toward the map, tracing the vast distances Japan can no longer cover. The older men bristle, clinging to pride, insisting the empire has endured worse. Yet even their voices tremble when the next set of figures arrives. The tone shifts from denial to dread, the kind that squeezes the chest and leaves no room for illusion. One strategist finally speaks the truth, hanging over everyone. If these numbers are real, we are already outmatched. The room absorbs the words like a slow, spreading bruise, marking the moment denial begins to collapse under the numbers. And in that tightening silence, every man understands that the final stage of reckoning has already begun for them. The doors open once more, and this time the officer entering does not attempt to hide the fear in his expression. He carries a single folder, thinner than the others, but every man in the room senses its weight long before it reaches the table. The report inside details the fall of key island positions, outposts Japan once considered untouchable. It lists convoys destroyed before they ever neared their destinations, and fuel reserves shrinking faster than planners can recalculate. No one interrupts as a senior commander unfolds the final page. His voice is steady at first, then falters as he reads the line that freezes every movement in the room. The United States now projects power across the entire Central Pacific. The sentence lands like a hammer. For a long moment, not a chair creaks, not a breath breaks the silence. The illusion of control, carefully maintained through months of selective optimism, finally shatters. A younger officer tries to speak but stops when he realizes there is nothing left to argue. Another stares at the map, seeing not territory but a shrinking horizon. At last, someone whispers the truth that has been lurking behind every report, every intercepted message, every hard number no one wanted to face. We have lost the initiative. The words settle over the table like a burial cloth. This is the breaking point, not marked by a single battle, but by the collective recognition that the Empire's momentum has died, and there is no strategy capable of reviving it. The tragedy of this moment is that it didn't arrive without warning. Years earlier, intelligence officers had quietly submitted assessments outlining America's industrial capacity, describing factories that could outproduce entire nations if pushed to war. Their reports were filed, acknowledged, and then conveniently set aside. Economists issued further alerts, warning that Japan's fuel reserves could never sustain a long conflict across the Pacific, especially once American submarines began hunting supply lines. Naval engineers added their own concerns, explaining that Japan lacked the shipyards to replace carriers at anything close to wartime loss rates. Yet each warning met the same fate. Pride blurred judgment. Early victories fed the belief that speed and boldness could overcome material limits. The leadership saw momentum as proof that their assumptions were correct, not that the risks were growing, and so the truth remained in the background, waiting patiently. When the realization finally arrived, it wasn't because new information appeared. It was because the old information could no longer be ignored. The Empire hadn't been ambushed by fate. It had been ambushed by its own refusal to believe the truth staring back at it. The room feels different now, drained of argument and bravado. Senior commanders speak softly, their voices carrying the brittle edge of men who finally see the cost of their decisions. No one mentions new offensives or bold plans. The conversation shifts to something far smaller, far heavier: how to survive what is coming. One admiral breaks the silence with a line that settles over the table like mourning cloth. If we continue like this, there will be no fleet left to defend the homeland. The words linger, forcing every man to confront the truth he once pushed aside. Ambition has given way to regret, and the atmosphere sinks into a quiet, almost painful reflection. When the final reports are set aside, the truth stands alone. This turning point wasn't marked by explosions or a decisive battle, but by a realization, quiet, undeniable, and heavier than any defeat Japan had faced before. The Pacific, once the Empire's arena of ambition, now moved under American control. One by one, the commanders leave the war room, walking more slowly than they entered, each man carrying the weight of a future they can no longer shape. A final reflection settles over the moment. Empires fall not when they are defeated, but when they realize they cannot win. And few outside those walls ever knew what was said that day.